Good evening and welcome to the Kidlit Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of Children's Book Insider. And welcome. It's good to be back. We were gone the month of August. So I'm happy to see all the familiar faces. And if you're watching this on the replay, welcome back. So if you're new to us and you want to keep in touch with everything we do, you could go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. You will get a free ebook that compiles 32 years of our tips and knowledge on getting started writing for kids. And you'll get on our mailing list, which means that you'll be notified of all of our upcoming events. So writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. And if you would like to subscribe to Children's Book Insider, our monthly newsletter celebrating its 32nd year of publication. We have a special deal for our socialites, $5 a month. writeforkids.org/CBI will get you there and you can subscribe. And one of the great features is every month we have an Above the Slush Pile code. It's an interview with either an editor or an agent, and they give us a special code. We have a special submission form that you use, and your submission will jump ahead of the line. And often they are from publishers such as Doubleday Books, you can see on this one here, who aren't normally taking unsolicited submissions. So that's just one of the perks of being a subscriber. And now we get to celebrate. I have missed the celebrations, so this is very exciting, and because I was gone for a month, we have a lot of really, really great celebrations for you all here. Oh, I just saw something in the chat box. Anna Parsons requested more information from my Above the Slush Pile submission. Congratulations, Peter. That is awesome. And please keep us posted on how that goes. Maybe we can do a celebration for you soon. So here are some great celebrations today. Artie Sonthalia. Artie, I knew I was going to mess up your last name. I'm sorry. Announces that her new middle grade novel, Read, Write, Race, has been published by Scholastic India and is available in India and on Amazon India. It's the story of Raghav, whose dyslexia stands in the way of his dream of reading and writing like his 5th grade classmates. So Artie, congrats on that. I'm really happy for you. Marta Magellan reports that her new picture book, Just Wild Enough, Maria Mayer, Primatologist, was published on September 1st and earned a good review from Kirkus. Woohoo! This is part of Albert Whitman's She's Made History series, and it's a biography that chronicles the groundbreaking accomplishments of Maria Mayer, a Cuban-American primatologist who grew up in Miami. So congrats, Marta. That's awesome, and I love the cover of that book. Johnny Ray Moore, who I know is here tonight, he announces that Crystal Publishing will release 3 new books by him in 2023. Hummingbird at Noon, Fly Away, the story of a ruby-throated hummingbird, which is a picture book. The story of Juneteenth, a board book for little learners, and the story of Barack. Oh, sorry, I was typing the title and I missed his last name. I hope we all know who that is, Barack Obama, our first African-American president. Another board book. So Johnny Ray Moore, congratulations. That is an incredible accomplishment. PJ McElvain, who is here tonight. She's a CBI contributor. She does a lot of our author interviews and other great industry articles, and she's the author of picture books, middle grade novels. She announces that Bloodhound Books will publish A Good Man in 2023, and it's a gritty adult contemporary psych thriller set in Montauk and Manhattan. Lots of murder and mayhem. That is great. I cannot wait to read that because I love murder and mayhem in my stories, not in real life. Okay. Vicki Thomas is thrilled that Wild Rose Press has accepted the Golden Lantern, book 2 in her Relics Adventure young adult fantasy series. And she says, my protagonist returns to the mystical forest in southern England to search for his older brother, but only finds more danger and trouble. Can love of family thwart the evil that dwells in the forest? You'll have to read the book to find the answer to that question. Congratulations, Vicki. That's great. So send us your good news, please. mail@rightforkids.org is the email, and put celebrate in the subject line, and I will feature you on a future Kidlit social. If you have a new book coming out, please send me a cover and a little description so I don't have to track that down. I really appreciate it. No celebration's too small. It does not have to be a publication. As you know, those of you who have been here a while, we celebrate every step of the way, finding an agent, getting a request from a publisher for more of your book, finding a critique group. All those are great things to celebrate. So let us know. And I have something to celebrate. This Thursday, we are holding a paid webinar, How to Earn Money as a Children's Writer. Wouldn't you like to know that? 10 powerful, easy steps to go from hobbyist to profitable professional. And this is with Lionel Bender. Now, Lionel has done 3 other webinars for us. You know, he's very experienced. He was editorial partner of book packager Bender Richardson White for 31 years. He's published 70 books, and he's very, very experienced on the industry and how to navigate it to be a professional if you really want to, make a living as a writer. And a lot of these things are things you can do while you're working on your passion project, the novel of your heart that might take you 3 or 4 years to write and submit, or longer. Some of you know, but you still want to make money. He's going to tell you how to do that. And you can see on the slide here some of the things he's going to be talking about. So that is this Thursday. It is $47 to register. If you can't make it live, you will get the recording, and he's got a really good PDF handout that goes with it. It will be, normally we do our webinars in the evening, but Lionel's in London, so we're going to have it in the middle of the day. It will be at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Again, if you can't make it live, you will get the recording probably by the end of the day. So rightforkids.org/writing-income will reserve your spot. Once the live event is over and it goes on our Writing Blueprint site, the price goes up to $67. So you save $20 by registering here. So I hope to see you there, because I have already seen his slides and they're amazing. It's going to be really, really informative. Okay, links of interest. This is kind of a celebrate, but it's also a link of interest, so I'm putting it here. Jean Matthew Hall, one of our people who visits us on the social, she announces her newest venture, Starlight Magazine, which is set to debut in the fall of 2022. And it's going to be an online flip book magazine published quarterly, meaning that it will come as like a PDF where kids can click on the arrow and the pages are going to turn. Parents and guardians will have to subscribe, obviously, for their children, but it'll be published quarterly. The goal is to provide a professionally designed magazine filled with fun, faith, fiction, and facts for kids, all through the lens of a Christian worldview. They are accepting submissions now. So if you are interested, you can email starlightmageditor@gmail.com and get their writer's guidelines. Now, I want you to note that this is currently not a paying market because it's just starting out. So that's why I didn't list it in the newsletter, because we only list paying markets. However, if you are looking to get some writing credits on your resume, starting out, sometimes these things are worth it. And, if you have a piece that ran somewhere else, but that first place only bought first rights, that first magazine, and you have the right to resell it, you could submit it here. So there's a lot of options for material here. So get those writer's guidelines and see what all the details are. I just wanted to let you know about that opportunity. Okay, and now we are going to meet my guests. John Bray is an author of stories for children. Typically, he writes picture books and has recently started to dabble a bit in middle grade fiction. Sometimes he also draws, but those drawings usually don't turn out how he thinks they will. That's kind of the way my drawings turn out. And he lives in St. Charles, Illinois. And you can see his website, John Bray Books. Josh Cleland is an illustrator working out of his home studio just outside of Portland, Oregon. His work has been featured in various children's magazines, including Highlights and Storytime, as well as on greeting cards, websites, billboards, and more. Some of his recent illustrated books include the books on the screen here. So you can go to his website and see everything he does. He's got a lot of really cool stuff on his website. But together, and the reason they're here tonight is they're going to be talking about how they are the creative team behind The End, a new picture book that comes out September 13th from Starry Forest Books. Kirkus Review called it an engaging book about accepting endings and celebrating beginnings, and gave it a starred review, which you know is a really big deal. So we are very excited about that. And if those of you who have been watching a lot of my Kidlit socials, the publisher of Starry Forest Books, Robert Aegis, he was on in July. And it was one of the most fascinating interviews we have done here on the social, and people just loved it. So you can go to our website, writeforkids.org, and see the replay of that, and you'll know about the philosophy behind this publisher, but we'll talk a little bit about that today. So Josh, John, why don't you come on and join me? There they are.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And
thanks for having us.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
I'm very excited. I feel like you're sort of a follow-up to my Starry Forest interview with Robert, which was amazing, and just one of those that everybody just loved. And I want to talk to you a little bit about working in that environment that he described, because it sounded like he just has a really great collaborative, environment with his publisher there. But I want to back up a little bit. And let's talk about The End. And, most people here are either aspiring or published writers, lots of people working on picture books. So we kind of know that the words come first. And so I want to start with you, John, and talk to you a little bit about, first of all, what inspired you to write The End, and where did this idea come from? You can describe the sort of idea behind the book a little bit.
Sure. The catalyst was it was twofold. There was a song that came out in 98 or 99 called Closing Time by Semisonic. And there's a line in that song, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And that, for me, it was like high school years. So that was a really big song, and I still enjoy it. And that one line really stuck with me. And around 2015, my life was kind of going through some changes, and I was just thinking about ending things and beginning new things and change. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to explore, in part for me. But then as I kind of dug into that a little bit, I was realizing that it's a really important concept for everyone. And if it's challenging for adults to grasp, it's probably challenging for kids. So I just set off, and I sat down and said, well, where will this idea take me? With this one lyric, where will it go?
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't know if it would go anywhere beyond just, a page in a journal type writing. And I just took it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fascinating where these ideas come from. And I love that you didn't abandon it because you thought, oh, kids won't get it. So it's kind of what in current publishing jargon is called a concept book. And that term has evolved since when I got started in publishing 36 years ago. Concept books really referred more to educational concepts like teaching numbers and shapes and colors and days of the week and that kind of thing. And now they include presenting these big ideas to kids in ways that will help them understand and maybe incorporate these ideas and concepts into their lives. And that's always really challenging for the writer because you're dealing with something abstract. And as you know, the picture book audience is very concrete. They are developmentally, they haven't quite reached the cognitive developmental stage yet where they can extrapolate into abstract. And time is also hard for them to grasp sometimes. So you've got beginning, middle, end in your book. How did you sort of find your way into this structurally once you had this germ of an idea in a way that would resonate with the picture book crowd?
Lots of time. I mean, the first draft, I should look this number up. The final book is under 400 words, and my first draft was over 1,000. So it was just me exploring not only different endings and beginnings, but different types of endings and beginnings. Because you mentioned time. So to say, at 5 o'clock versus 10 o'clock, those are a little bit more tangible. They're a little more finite. So exploring things like that, and then more generalized, you stopped brushing your teeth and you're going to do the next task. And built the structure out from there, and then just over a few years kind of ruthlessly cut it back and cut it down and tried to get to what I thought was, I guess, the essence of endings and beginnings in a way that is tangible without being so defined that it feels like I'm creating a rule for endings and beginnings.
Right.
Because I didn't want to create a rule, and I didn't set out. It wasn't so much that I set out and said, well, I want to teach children about endings and beginnings or time. It was like, let me explain this concept to myself. And could this be translated into language that children can grasp without talking down to them and oversimplifying it? And that's kind of where I landed on these examples that are, I tried to, part of the goal after I really whittled it down was to make them as universal as possible. So that, maybe not every reader will, relate to every ending and beginning, but enough of them to kind of make that connection.
Right. Yeah.
But it's strange. I mean, when I wrote this, the first draft, my son was 12. So he was already, older than the average reader of this book. But it's also interesting to have children in your life, because you could easily say, well, these children understand, so this must be good. It must work. But the levels of understanding and how they understand is so different. So it is a challenge to try and find that sweet spot, I guess.
Right. Well, and I think the best picture books, and certainly the best concept books, the way we're using the term now, are open-ended enough and universal enough that every reader can bring their own experience to the story and get something from it that is relevant to their own lives. And I think you were smart not to make it so specific that if a kid had this book read to them and said, well, that doesn't apply to me in exactly that way, then it would have no meaning to them. And you don't want that. So I think that was a good way to go, but it's also a risk because, again, a lot of publishers certainly, and even parents might go, oh, it's too abstract. But I think the illustrations certainly helped ground it and make it more specific as well. That was,
and that was a piece of it as well, I think, was to realize to cut out the pieces that would have kind of boxed Josh in on what he was able, you might finish eating dinner, but you could be eating anything for dinner. One of my original drafts specified what that meal would be, which automatically some children wouldn't relate to, but then it would also really limit where Josh could take that. So it was kind of balancing both, like capturing the attention and the understanding, and also giving him that creative liberty to run with it.
Right. So, Josh, I want to get to you in 1 second here. You're waiting very patiently. But I have one quick question, because this does apply to the illustrations. You wrote this in second person point of view. So using the you voice, you speaking directly to the reader. Why did you choose that? That's kind of unusual for a picture book, though actually for the concept books that I see that being used more and more. Was that just the way it came out, or was that a deliberate choice?
It was a bit of both. It was a deliberate choice. That's how it was originally drafted. And
Mhm.
I'm really picky about second person. I tend to think the only time it works well is in a shorter piece, like a picture book. When I've read novels that are 300 pages and in second person, it doesn't pull me in for some reason.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I did try to write it. At one point I wrote it in third person with a character, like
Mhm.
building the character in, and that it every time I would try it that way, it felt like it just muddied the concept, and
Mhm.
it would focus too much on the character and not enough on the concept, which was the opposite of what I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
I feel like with you also, it does give them something to anchor onto. With this
Mhm.
kind of difficult concept, they can anchor themselves into it as they go through it.
Right. Right. All right. So, Josh, so you get this manuscript, and your illustrations are very joyful and engaging and colorful. And I liked that choice because, and I'm assuming that the Starry Forest, the editor there, chose you to create this project. You two didn't know each other, is that correct? Beforehand?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I like that because the text is about, a lot of it's about endings, and that could get, even though it's not depressing in any way, it might feel a little sad to kids because it's like, oh, it's all about things ending, but your illustrations are so joyful. And I like that. So what did you think when you first got this manuscript and you read it?
Well, I mean, I loved it. I really connected to the concept just in my own life. And and frankly, I was really up for the challenge. I mean, like as you mentioned, I mean, it's a very conceptual book. So as an illustrator, you know, the challenge of bringing that, you know, to a visual form and enhancing the story,
Mhm.
um, there was a challenge to it that really, you know, that I was really up for. So, yeah, when I think Robert, I can't remember if he first sent over the uh, synopsis of the story, which sounded really intriguing, and then the manuscript. I'm like, this is awesome. This is, I mean, I could
Mhm.
totally relate to it. I don't know how I'm going to illustrate it yet, but I'm, but bring it on. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, really, as an illustrator, uh, I always like um, the concept of 1 + 1 = 3 or 5 or 10. So you got the illustration, you get the manuscript and the illustration. Those together tell a whole new
Mhm.
thing. And I felt like this was a really great opportunity to do that. So
Absolutely. I'm going
yeah,
to show a slide with a few of the illustrations on it here, so people can get a sense. And these are not, they're just from random places in the book. Um, but we talked about the second person. And when sometimes when I see sort of these books about big ideas and they are written in second person, the illustrator chooses to have different characters on each spread so that it's not just one character representing the reader all throughout the book. You chose this one girl to
Mhm.
basically represent the reader throughout the book. And I love it. She's wonderful. How did you land on her? What was appealing about her to you?
Yeah. So it kind of I kind of went through some iterations initially, and I think this was because of the second person um, writing that I actually wrote when I did my storyboarding um, and sketched out the entire book. I actually had a single character that was the same,
Mhm.
but you never saw their face.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of like, you know, that I think that was a play from the second person. And then, but the cat was always there. There's
Mhm.
always a cat that kind of provides, you know, visual like commentary
Mhm.
and things like that. And it was just kind of like back and forth with some feedback with the editor Allison Hill and Chad Beckerman, the book designer, that we decided let's have the character. Let's actually show the character. So I
Mhm,
think right away I actually illustrated it as just one character. I think maybe that's kind of how I interpreted the story.
mhm,
So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that it could be several, because that's probably true. But it was not really something I ever explored.
right.
Um, it's just the way things developed, yeah.
Well,
And
also, your illustrations add a plot line
yeah,
that's never mentioned in the text, which I think is really important because it draws the reader from one page to the next. And it's really about the beginning is the end of school. I mean, the beginning of the book
yeah,
is the end of school. And then we go through the summer, and then the end of summer is the beginning of the next school year. So you have this cycle. And I think having the same character throughout makes sense because you're following her journey of beginnings and endings throughout the entire summer. So I love that. And then there's a nice little twist at the end where there's a new beginning for her. That's I'm not going to tell people what it is, so they have to read the book. But to me, this book is also about the nature of time, the progression of events from beginning, middle, and end, which again is just a big that obviously is the point of the book, but also to me it's about living in the moment because you really see how she experiences everything that she's doing in the moment, even though then it ends, then she starts something else and she's experiencing that fully. And that's not anything that was ever mentioned in the text, but I really got that sense from your illustrations. And I really liked that sort of extra little layer there, that, beginnings, middles, and ends are going to happen whether you have no control over that, but you can be in the moment and experience each one as it comes. And so again, I felt that your illustrations added that layer, which the best illustrations do. They add something that is not really in the words, but it elevates the book to another level. And I don't know if you intended that, but that's what I got from it.
yeah. I mean, it was definitely something that we thought about and we tried to really bring forth.
Mm,
Each little vignette provides its own little story and its own little, like, you can be happy something's ending, or you can be sad that something's ending. And so each time we get to kind of explore that.
mhm,
So
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me go back to full screen here so I can, whoops, stop share. That's what I want to do. Okay. Um, Josh, a lot of our viewers are writers, but not illustrators. And so they're always very curious as to about how the illustration process comes about. And I think knowing that will help them understand why it takes so long for a picture book to get produced. So can you walk us through some of the steps? You get the manuscript and you decide this is something I want to do, and then what happens?
Yeah. Well, this one specifically, yeah. So you get the manuscript in general. You get the manuscript, and say you've agreed to the book. You've settled on the schedule and all that. Um, a lot of times, a manuscript will have like art notes. Especially if it's like specific to the story and, a requirement of the story.
Mhm.
This one, I don't think it really had much art notes, which made it a lot of fun. That it really gave me like leeway to like explore a lot. Like, this is cool. I mean, I'm actually pretty like, I can go both ways when it comes to art notes, you know whether you know whether they're there or not. But so so once I get the manuscript, if it's already broken up into pages, a lot of times it is. It's already, the publisher's already broken it up to pages. I'll start sketching out all the scenes from like kind of a bird's eye view, just seeing the book as a whole,
Mhm.
um, kind of getting the rhythm of the book, the point of view, where the action is. sometimes you want to zoom in, sometimes you want to move out. And with this book, that was really important because that's where like the overall arching story really developed, was in this stage. So that can kind of take some time, especially like, as I submit it back to the editor and designer and get their feedback and revise that. And then it's a matter of, refining, zooming in on the sketches, really refining the sketches, moving on to color. And yeah, so a lot of it's kind of straightforward, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I printed out like an really early thumbnail. So this is kind of what, it's just almost just like I'm actually drawing, really small, just seeing where all the action is. And so my initial explorations actually really didn't even have an overarching story. That kind of developed later. But yeah,
that's great.
So
So sometimes in the process of this sort of back and forth, and you start illustrating things that are in the text, and then the editor goes back to the author and says, you know what, I think we could take these words out because the pictures already show it. Did any of that happen, John, during this process?
Honestly, I don't. There were a couple pages where we might have lost a preposition or something, but I don't remember any time where we actually cut description or chunks that were translated in the illustration. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we hit that point. I know we did spend quite a bit of time on at least a couple pages with placement, because sentences would split in half, and how did they split in half in terms of where they went with the illustration, and commas versus em dashes and parentheses, and but I don't think we cut at that stage.
I don't remember anything getting cut. Yeah, if it did, it went beyond. It was nothing I noticed. Yeah. Yeah.
So roughly how long a process was it from the time, say, John, they accepted your manuscript, said, yep, we want to give you a publishing contract, and then found Josh, and then Josh did all his work, and the book finally was printed? About how long would you say that process took?
I guess if we look at when the book will be released, which is a week from today,
right,
it would have been, it was accepted at the end of 2020. So not quite 2 years, I guess 18 to 20 months.
Yeah, that's actually on the short side for picture books.
Right.
Yeah, that's considered speedy.
Yes.
Probably because you're working with a smaller publisher too. They don't have 15 projects going simultaneously, and I'm sure that helps. So, right. Yeah. So, John, you said your son read the manuscript. Is that correct? You showed it to
early on, you mean?
Early on, yeah.
Early on, yes, but he was 12 at the time. So,
12. Have either of you had a chance to share this with kids yet? The book.
I have read it. Well, I have not read it. I've been in a room with friends who read it to their children, and I've had friends elsewhere who've read it to their kids and sent me feedback, but not personally, not yet. And I'm very excited for that.
I bet. I was just curious as to what you felt from the kids and what their reactions were. Yeah.
Yes.
So that'll be fun. I hope you've got some school visits coming up, or
yes,
sort of live events. That would be great. That'll
yes, a couple readings and some school visits. And I can already say, Josh, I haven't told you this yet, but the Infinite Blanket Fort is a hit. I mean, kids love that. Like they latch onto that immediately.
Oh yeah, I'm sure parents are gonna really appreciate it.
Exactly.
The curtains, the tablecloths, everything's going on the floor. Yeah.
I had that feeling.
Yeah.
We're not going to be very popular.
No, but I could see, doing readings at story time in the libraries, and every kid gets to bring their blanket and then they make a huge fort, in the library or something. That could be really fun.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, there you go. So, a lot of people watching this are aspiring authors or author illustrators. So they haven't gone through the submission process yet, etc. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you both came to work with Starry Forest Books? So, John, we'll start with you.
Sure. This was actually the result of, I always get the hashtags mixed up. I believe it was PitMad, hashtag PitMad on Twitter.
Okay.
Maybe 3 to 6 months before that hashtag stopped. And I pitched this book, and I think technically the cutoff, it was like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I think Allison liked it at like 8:01 p.m. So I was just about at the point where I figured it was just going to last in Twitter world somewhere. And she liked it, and it was a couple days later, a day later, that I sent her the manuscript, and then that kind of just started. I mean, it started the process, but publishing goes at its own speed. So it had gone, and I was also at the time actively querying for representation. So in all honesty, I think it was just part of what I was sending out, and I had kind of forgotten. I have a list, but it wasn't top of my mind. And then I heard back from her probably 2 months later. And she said she really liked the manuscript. And she had some edits, some suggestions, kind of just some broad concept suggestions. And then we worked on it from there.
Great. So for those of you who don't know what he's talking about with PitMad, there are Twitter pitch parties where you can do a pitch for your manuscript during a specific time period using specific hashtags, and then editors and agents can like your pitch, and that's basically an invitation then to submit to them. And I actually have a couple of those in the current issue of my newsletter, so we try to announce those as they come out. So they're sometimes they have specific themes or specific age groups or certain types of writers they're looking for, but sometimes they're general. But it's a great opportunity. I have had a lot of published authors on the social who got an editor or an agent through a Twitter pitch party. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they work. So
yes, they do.
That's great. So Josh, how about you? How did you get connected with Starry Forest?
So Robert actually emailed me. He reached out to me. The designer on the book, Chad Beckerman, I had worked with him in the past on another book, an independent book, and I think that's how we got connected. So I didn't do any submissions or anything like that. So it was maybe a bit unorthodox in a way. But maybe not, because I do think a lot of the times things happen when you made a connection a while back and then it comes back and really helps out. So so that's really how I got connected was through Chad.
Yeah, great. And I think that you're right, that happens a lot. And with illustrators, I think it happens a lot because you might have done some design work that they saw, or something else, and they actually go and look at your website and go, this guy's good, and then they can contact you.
I think Chad, I think I did a portfolio review with him, and so he reviewed my portfolio, and that's how I got connected with him. So anything like that, I think it always helps. It's, I always look at it as like just putting just feelers out there, and everything you put out, you never know what's going to come back. So
sure.
Yeah.
Quickly, for the illustrators in the crowd, you mentioned portfolio review. Do you have a few tips for what should be in your portfolio if you want to illustrate children's books?
Yeah, for books, I think anything that shows story, shows a progression of story. If you're new, if you've never done anything, just maybe just do like 3 back-to-back illustrations that show a progression. Showing family is is always really important. You know, kids, anything in kiddom, you know, anything in like, you know, things like that,
Mhm,
emotions, you know, things like that. I think that's really valuable to
mhm.
show.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Do you recommend, a lot of illustrators have several different styles that they work in. Do you recommend showcasing all of them, or should you pick a couple that you feel are your strongest and just focus on that?
yeah, that's always the question. That's the
Yeah.
big debate. I'm not really sure where I land on it.
Uh,
Because I kind of just draw. I draw what I would like to draw in the way I like to draw it, and then if I feel like it really resonates and I post it on my portfolio or Twitter or Instagram, actually mostly on Instagram. So I think there's people who say you need to really like focus on a style.
mhm,
And then there's others that say you need to have a general, you know, you need to have
mhm,
like a mix of styles. I think it kind of really, I think it kind of depends on the artist,
mhm,
what they're comfortable with. I always say put your strongest foot forward, you know, whichever that is,
mhm.
and then let that kind of dictate. You know, if you do have a few different styles, maybe, you know, breaking those up if it makes sense in your portfolio.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's always a fun question because
Right.
you never, you know, it's always a different. No, it's always depends on the artist, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Putting you on the spot there a little bit.
No, it's actually a really great question
Yeah.
because yeah, and it's I think if you look at my work and you've seen how it evolves, like some people say it kind of has like a different, you know, there's different, I have different styles for different things, but I've never really like taken the time to break them down. Um, maybe I should, I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think if you overanalyze stuff, then you start
Yeah.
getting self-conscious about it, and then, yeah, it
Yeah.
it loses
I
something.
think I think when you do talk with like a potential, you know, art director or designer, I think it's always good if you do have several styles, like, you know, talking to them and say, hey, which pieces really resonated with you? And a lot of times they'll have already done this when they reach out to you, or reach out to me, say, hey, we love this, we love these pieces. This is what we're going for, and so that really helps me out a lot. Um, and so that's we kind of did that with like with this book too. You know, Allison really, you know, she kind of pointed out some things I'd done in the past, and so that was kind of where I kind of guided some things. So
Great, great.
yeah,
Well, thank you. Before we get to some questions, I wanted to ask each of you if you have any advice for people who are aspiring writers or illustrators. And John, how long have you been writing to get to this point?
Um, I mean, actively writing as an adult, knowing that I wanted this to be something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life, probably 12 years at this point,
Mhm,
but not actively trying to sell that entire time. So
mm,
a good probably 4 years in the beginning was just finding my voice, finding my style, and writing, and then actually trying to sell.
mhm. Yeah. And that's so important to take that time and have that patience because it shows if you rush it. It really
Oh,
shows in the work for sure. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And I think it's really important it's really important always. I think especially for picture book creation to constantly read picture books.
Mhm.
Just I mean, there are days where I have sat in the kids section at the library with just stack after stack of just going through picture books to see what's out there, what resonates with you, what works with you, what doesn't work with you, and why. And it's just important. I think even when you found your voice, when you have your direction, there's so many amazing books coming out,
Yeah.
and it's tremendously helpful, and they're so fun. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
best stories are picture
that's
books.
what
True. And
that's
it's
what
just
makes our job fun. Yeah.
fun
Right.
research. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Josh, do you have any advice for aspiring illustrators or
Yeah,
artists?
yeah, for like yeah, for children's book illustration specifically, I think I would say really I'll kind of echo what I've said before, like really focus on telling stories through your illustrations, and maybe even learn how to be your own storyteller. I think that's really valuable with illustrations. And then also, just learning the business of children's book illustration, and also echoing what John said, read a lot of children's books and
Mhm.
take in a lot of illustrations, and just being a student of the craft.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's get to a few questions here. Some of these have been already answered. Um, okay, so this is for John. When you pitched your book at the Twitter pitch party, was the entire manuscript written at that point?
Yes, it is different than when it was, just based on editing with Allison, but I considered it fully finished, edited, polished, ready to go. I've heard of people not at that stage and pitching. I did not want that kind of pressure. I needed to
No.
know that it was ready to be there. And you also don't want to give yourself that kind of pressure and not be able to deliver when you have that opportunity.
Absolutely. A lot of people write a really terrific pitch, but they haven't delivered on the manuscript to match that expectation because it's not finished yet. Yeah, absolutely. So I think
Right.
that's smart. So Mary asked, does the publication process go quicker if there is already both text and illustration? I assume she means if one person is doing both. Do you imagine it would have gone much faster? I mean, Josh, have you ever written and illustrated? I looked through the books I found on your website, and it didn't look like you had.
Yeah, not yet. I mean, it's something that's on my list. And I do imagine that it could go faster in the right circumstance. Because you write the book and then you do a book dummy, and so a lot of that preliminary work is already done. So I can imagine that can kind of like speed up the
Right.
process. But I think a lot of it is also dependent on the publisher's schedules and their timetables.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
it could speed it up or not.
that's true.
Um,
So basically, you'd be
yeah,
putting in that work before the submission starts. So
yeah,
the creative process takes the same amount of time, but when the publisher's involved,
yeah. But when the publisher
Mhm,
takes on it, I can imagine that could speed it up. Yeah. So
mhm. Yeah, assuming that they like what you've done with the illustrations. If not, then you're starting over anyway.
yeah,
And I imagine if you were to submit art with your text, your own text, you wouldn't want it to be finished art because you want the editors
yeah.
and the
Well,
art director are going to want to have
yeah,
input.
I think the rule of thumb is that you have one or two maybe finished spreads, knowing that they can
Mhm.
change, because you might illustrate it in a certain aspect ratio, and it might be changed. So you might have to redo those.
Sure.
Um, so I think, but just some finished artwork, and then the rest
Mhm.
sketches or thumbnails, maybe a cover. I've even heard actually just even illustrating an end sheet,
Uh-huh.
the stuff that goes on the end of the books, just to kind of give it that polished feel.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. That's a good point.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Mary clarified here for me. She says, I meant different people, separate people writing and illustrating. And I can address that a little bit here. Most publishers don't like that if you submit a manuscript and you go out and find an illustrator yourself and submit the illustrations with your manuscript because the art might not be up to their standards, or they might, if they like the art and not the text, they're going to reject the entire project. So unless there are a few smaller publishers I've seen in their submission guidelines that they say it's okay to submit illustrations with this if you know someone who you think would be good, but most publishers don't like that for various reasons. Um, John, have you ever heard anything different in your various submissions and reading about the industry?
No, that's basically the message that I've received. I mean, the only exception being that if you're a very well-known
Yeah.
children's book author, and it is a very well-known illustrator, and you happen to be connected and friends. But
Yes.
even then, I've heard from illustrators and authors that it's often so hard for their schedules to align that it's difficult for them to commit to that.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely true. This is a question for you, John, from Jessica. Did the end ever have any other titles? Did the editor have any input on the title?
The editor, that's a great question. The editor did have input. I mean, honestly, Allison had input on anything and everything. The end was always the end. I think we might have briefly talked about calling it the beginning, which kind of went against just the whole concept that I was going for. It kind of flipped it again.
Sure.
But it was always the end. And from my very first draft to the book, the very beginning and the very end have remained unchanged. So it was always kind of written with those anchor pieces, and that's the title that felt right.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it flows right into the first page,
Right.
the title, and then a comment on the title. So
Yes.
it makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I actually love picture books that do that. I'm seeing that more and more, where the story really starts on the cover and the end papers are sometimes part of the story and the title page. And by the time you get to the first actual page of the book, so much has already happened. So I feel that this kind of did some of that a little bit. So this is a question again from Mary for Josh. She says, do you prefer a dummy book or just the manuscript? And I'm guessing here this applies primarily, like if you were approached by an author who wanted to self-publish, they wanted to hire you, and they had sketched out a dummy of how they saw their book looking. Would you want to see that, or do you really want just the manuscript and a blank slate so you can imagine it yourself?
I think it kind of depends. You know, I've actually worked with publishers who sent over. They've done some of the thumbnailing process already. So like some of the placements, or maybe like this character's here, or that, you know, things like that. And I actually kind of like that in some instances, especially like if timelines involved, like if I have to do if it's a quick project. A lot of times like the board books, smaller board books, they can have a quicker turnaround. So that kind of like speeds up the process.
Sure.
And they're always usually really receptive to any feedback I have to like changing, like, well, what if we do this for the layout? You know, it's always just a starting point. So it's always, you know, as far as like with independent books, I think it all depends. You know, this book, I think Chad sent over the PDF with just the everything broken out into pages, but nothing was actually on the pages, just the words. I'm not sure if that counts with the question, but I think, yeah, I think, you know, it's whatever is right for the project for me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of like easygoing with it.
Yeah.
I think as long as there's a collaborative spirit, I'm game either way.
Well, and what authors need to realize too, if they include art notes in a manuscript, sometimes the editor takes those out before they send it to the illustrator if they feel it's too much. You might send a dummy book over to the editor and the editor will not pass it on to the illustrator. So, I mean, there might be the option of the illustrator not seeing the stuff or choosing to ignore it, obviously. So, but I think, you know, every project's different, like you said. So there's a sort of a related question here from Sheila, and this goes really for both of you. How in art notes, or separate from a manuscript note, so it would be on the manuscript maybe, do you explain graphic arts or calligraphy in another language that needs to be in the illustration? So something visual that sort of enhances the plot that the author imagines We see a lot of picture books now with speech bubbles where the dialogue's in a speech bubble instead of written out. And that might be necessary for the tone of the book. John, first of all, have you ever submitted manuscripts that have art notes in them like that? And how would you best handle that, do you think?
I have. I think if it's the way that I look at art notes is I will only add them if it feels either essential to include in the story, like if it drives the plot or affects the plot in some way. If the ball has to be blue and not green,
Yeah.
that's an art note.
Mhm.
If it doesn't matter, you don't need to put it, even if you're really committed to
Mhm.
green or red, it's kind of irrelevant.
Right.
But if it's something like calligraphy, if it's something like that, I think, I've always heard that your art notes should be concise, and I think that's true. But you need to make sure that you're conveying what it is if it's truly important to what the story is about.
Mhm.
If not, I mean, I had 0 art notes in this book, and I'm so happy with that because Josh just ran with it in the best possible way. And Josh, you said earlier, I think for illustrators, like tell your own story, and you 100% did that here. So your idea of 1 + 1 = 3, I mean, that's what it was. And I think back, if I had included art notes on some of the things that I thought in an original draft maybe needed to be there and needed to be a certain way, it would not be what it is today,
Mhm.
because there was nothing that was essential to be in this. So you
Right.
were able to create that story. And I think that's just something else to consider, because it's two stories in one that make another story. And it's a huge
Mhm.
part of what makes a picture book so compelling.
Absolutely. It is a collaborative effort. And it's really both of you sort of have ownership of half the book. And um, I think that's a hard thing for beginning authors to understand is you are letting go. You have to be able to let go of half of the creative process for the illustrator to do their best work. And I'm sure that is something that just takes time to get comfortable with in a lot of ways.
Right.
Yeah. Josh, have you ever gotten a manuscript with art notes? And if so, how were they best presented to you that they didn't distract you from, first of all, reading the manuscript, just, and really seeing it for what it was, and then being able to do your own creative work?
Yeah, yeah, I'm working on a book right now that had a lot of art notes, and it's in red. The notes are in red, and so that's an easy formatting thing right there. Yeah, I think, let's see, it's actually a really good question. I think, you know, yeah, I think if like John said, if it's essential, then add it, then add them. If it's not, then maybe they don't need to be there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's really the key that everybody says is, they have to be absolutely essential to the understanding of the story. And I think this is where your critique group can help you out a lot. You can take all the art notes out and then ask the critique group, did you understand this and this and this was going on just from the text? And if they say yes, don't put in the art note. If they said, oh, I didn't know that the ball had to be blue, now I understand, I was confused, I thought, then you could put the art note in, right? So two more quick questions and I'm going to let you go because we're
Awesome.
at the top of the hour here. Actually, this is for John, but I'll throw it out to either of you. Did either of you ever self-publish? Well, first of all, John will ask you this. And if so, the question is, how did you find an illustrator for your book? And it's expensive to hire your own illustrator. So first of all, have you ever self-published?
I did years ago, 2014, if I'm remembering the date right. I worked on a manuscript. I was very fortunate. A very good friend of mine is an illustrator and a designer, and we were together. And I mentioned this, the concept for this book, and he loved it and just kind of randomly sketched up a page. And we decided to embark on that collaboratively. We both learned a lot. Somehow our friendship survived. It was a process. Independently publishing is, I think I'm really glad that I did it, because it gave me a better understanding of publishing and
Mhm.
absolutely everything that is involved from start to finish. But
Mhm.
it is, I think doing it well is a very heavy lift, and you need to decide if you like those pieces of it.
Absolutely. And I think the one mistake a lot of picture book writers make when they self-publish is not spending enough for good illustrations. And that illustrations are expensive to do them well. To hire someone like Josh to do your books, it's going to cost you money, but it's worth it, because that is often what sells the book. Certainly when you are in a bookstore and you're browsing the picture books, the title and the cover illustration are what make you pick up the book. The words then carry the story, but the illustrations are very important. So if you can't afford the illustrations that you want now, I would suggest waiting until you can, because you're going to put all that work and effort into something that you might not get your money out of if you don't do the best possible job. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, last one for Josh here, and this is a really big question, so
Bring
I'm,
it.
I'm sorry, but it's a really good one. It's from a writer. Can you tell us things we can do with our stories that might make it easier for you, the illustrator? Sometimes it is difficult to write the story not knowing how it will be illustrated. That's a very vague question, so I'm going to give you my interpretation of it. And John, you can help with this. With picture books, we're always, those of us who are teaching people how to write picture books, we're saying leave out the parts that the illustrator is going to draw. How do you do that? And Josh, how do you know what those parts are if they've been left out? So do the words have to imply certain action but not say
That's a
it?
really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could have prepared you for it. I didn't know it was coming. So John, for you, you left out a lot of the parts that he was going to draw, and you started with 1,000 words and you kept going down, 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 down. How did you make
Right.
the decisions finally to say, I can leave this out?
I think for me, it was the essence of the story was the concept of beginnings and endings. So if we think about when she's eating dinner,
Mhm.
there was one draft where it was, Josh would have been drawing just a table full of various different food items. But as I kept editing that down and it got smaller and smaller and smaller, I realized that it didn't matter
Mhm.
what the food was. For me, the time of day, so dinner would normally be evening, that mattered because that was part of that idea of beginnings and endings and progression. But the character could have been eating anything and it wouldn't have
Right.
made any difference for the overall story, but it gave Josh that runway to just do whatever he
Mhm.
wanted with it. And I think
Mhm.
that's where I've landed just over the years, is give the illustrator space
Mhm. Mhm.
to create their art. I think
Yeah.
it's really, really, really important.
Yeah. And I think you did the right thing. You asked, what am I trying to say with this scene?
Right.
And I think if you ask yourself that, and it's I'm talking about the end of one thing, the beginning of another, the progression of time, whatever specifically you were saying with that scene, that's all you need to say in the text. And then everything else is up to the illustrator to fill in the details. And if what you say is compelling enough, the illustrator, I assume, is going to know what those details are. So that's where, Josh, how do you know what
Yeah, I
he's
mean,
not saying?
yeah. Well, that's actually a really good point, because then it's like, then I take it and I'm like, is there something else I can illustrate or put in that also enhances that concept, maybe in a different way, So yeah, it's really, yeah, it's kind of dependent on the story and the book, the
Mhm.
manuscript and what's required. But yeah, but that's a great thing to think about, I think.
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
I think, again, it's a matter of trust. I'm talking to the writers here. Trust that the editor is going to pick an illustrator who has enough creativity and experience to look at your words and know what you're not saying and write it. It's like, they talk about jazz is the
Yeah.
notes you don't play. It's
Yeah.
it's
I
like
mean,
that.
yeah. And it's actually something that I take very seriously. Like
Mhm.
I know that this is like the author's baby, right? That I'm being
Mhm.
entrusted in. And so that's something that, my first line of duty, the first thing I have to do is convey, is to support what they're trying to get at, and then move beyond that. So
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah, I think probably John was spot on. Like it just probably just takes a lot of drafts and a lot of like
Yeah.
thinking what the most important thing is, and I do that even in my illustrations, like try to pare down what, all the things that I don't need in my illustrations. So, but but that will still support my concept and what I'm trying to convey.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
And I
yeah,
think just generally speaking too, with kind of that weird feeling of handing over your manuscript, I think it's important to remember that everyone, like you're building this team that believes in the story. So if you have an agent, the agent is selling this book because they believe in it. The editor takes it on because they believe in it. The illustrator takes it on because they believe in it. So you have all of these people who aren't just doing it because it has to be done. They're doing it because they want to make it something
Mhm.
incredible.
Mhm.
And like you have to remember that everyone cares about it as much as you do,
Sure.
even though no one has seen it, until after you're done.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very true, and everyone's invested in it. And that's true. You have a huge team. And that's what Robert was talking about with Starry Forest when I interviewed him, is he tries to pick the team. He thinks of it as the team effort, not just the author or just the illustrator. And clearly that makes a big difference when you approach it that way. Yeah. Well, we are past the hour, so I am going to let you go. Sorry for those of you who may have had other questions, but this is what happens when we have a great discussion going. Thank you both so much for being here tonight. This
Thank
was
you,
thanks for
Laura.
having it.
wonderful. And best of luck with your book launch next week. I hope to
Thank you.
start seeing all over YouTube read alouds and all sorts of stuff you're doing. If you have appearances, anything like that that you want to let us know about, please let me know. We'll announce it on the social so people can keep track of that.
Perfect.
Yeah, but best of luck.
So,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
all right. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
all. Yeah, and we'll see
Yeah,
you
thank
next
you.
time.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.